Today we are going to see what if Naruto fall in love with Femme Gaara. If you end up liking this video, please consider subscribe. So without further ado, let's get into the video. 4 months 19 days 12 hours 36 minutes and 42 seconds. Barfoom sinking further into one of Koha's hot springs. The heat reminded her of home. It had been far too long since she had last fallen asleep. With her sudden willpower to fight the demon within her, mother had been doubling the efforts to drive her insane. 4 months 19 days 12 hours 37 minutes and 15 seconds ago she had found the answer to her insomnia problem, but the answer only made her problem worse. Now that she was familiar with sleep, she found it harder to function without just a few more hours. Gaara leaned her hair back. She had decided to grow out her normally short red hair. It was as uncontrollable as Tamar's, only much more wild, like a flame dancing in the wind. Until what Gaara Tamari asked, a comfortable distance away from her, not close enough to be awkward but not far enough to show fear. Gaara was happy with the distance. It would be too troublesome to explain, Gaara thought dryly, choosing not to respond to Tamari's question. She didn't want to give her sister wrong idea, not after their relationships had improved so greatly. They not planning on killing someone, or you? Tamari asked. When she got no response, she nearly gasped when Gaara's pale turquoise eyes snapped to her with an annoyed look. She had either been very wrong or very right. Sorry, she mumbled. Oting a bit further away, she was getting close to the I'm afraid of you distance. The wouldn't be happy if I did, Gaara said plainly. She didn't want her sister to move any further away. She wasn't entirely certain if the burn on her cheeks was from the bath. She brought a hand up to forehead. The place he touched her still burned a hot, pleasant heat whenever he came to mind. Tamari leaned in closer, her face bright. As Gaara had gotten closer to Tamari, it became apparent that the blonde was a gossip second only to their brother. Gaara returned to Mary's mirthful look with one of disdain. It's one of the Leaf Ninja, isn't it? Dearie was for once unaffected by Gaara's glare. Gaara was re-evaluating the distance she wanted her sister to be from her. At this moment, a couple miles would probably be a good start. Let me guess. Tamari was fanning her hands as a way of telling Gaara not to speak. Not that the though UGHT had crossed her mind. It's the green one, right? Rockle. Gaara briefly considered whether it was illegal to murder a sand ninja, and Koha it was at the very least frowned upon. Sass? Tamari asked, a smirk on her face. They had just failed a mission to aid Koha in the retrieval of Sasa. Gaara rolled her eyes. I'm done, she said curtly, quickly rising out of the waters. This was mostly pleasant. She offered her sister well. The idea to stay in Koha had been Gaara's idea. The hot spring trip was due to Tamari's persistence. It's Naruto, isn't it? It wasn't a question, it was a statement. Gaara was glad she was already past her sister. Her cheeks were burning, however the spot where he touched her burned twice as hot. The slightest smile formed on her face. She would be able to sleep soon. Naruto Yamaki flashback. 4 months 19 days 19 hours 43 minutes ago. Mother wanted blood. A tribute was needed. A tribute left half given. Tonic. She would spill the blood of that ninja. Rockla, he will have blood soon. Mother. Gaara smiled. In the darkness of her lone room, the others were likely asleep, and even if they weren't, they wouldn't be able to stop her, not when she was so close on the rooftops that Fuldosit tried to kill her. His blood would not satisfy Mother. It would not prove her existence, for he didn't deserve to exist in the first place. Arriving in the hospital, she could smell her kill. It was a primal thing, an intense driving me to finish the kill. She passed by the rooms one after another. Rockley was at the end of the hall. Soon she would prove her existence, and Mother would be sad. She stopped short. Third room from the end, the door and window wide open. There lay Nito Yamaki. He was lay spate on the bed in the middle of the white ring. His injuries recent. Such an idiotic, worthless fool couldn't be worth the effort. It wouldn't prove his existence, however. These like me, Gaara thought, seeing the seal pulse on his abdomen. I'm like him. The thought burned in Gaara's mind. To kill another like him would surely prove her existence, and it would be so quick, so easy. A single thought would end the boy's life. Gaara walked into N. UTK room, closing the door behind her, her footsteps lighter than his soft snoring. A sound Gaara found. It was a sound Gaara could describe. It wasn't important anyways. She willed the sand to begin floating towards Naruto. She suppressed a giggle. Soon his life would be over and his warm blood would be within Mother's sand nis Sakuran Naruto mumbled, turning slightly, causing Gar to give a startled jump. It was the tiniest of movements, so small it was almost unnoticeable. Naruto Uzumaki, I will let mother drink your blood tonight, Gar thought with glee as she began to move closer. She prepared to have the sand strike. The sand shifted, turning into a sharpened blade. Cuts bleed more. Another step, and suddenly all Gar felt was tired. She stood blinking a moment, looking at the sand, ready to strike at Naruto's throat. The sand was almost looking at her expectantly. She looked at it expectantly. There was no voice telling her to kill, no constant chittering about blood, no consuming madness. There was only Gar. For the first time ever it was just her, and she felt tired. A warm feeling swelled up inside of her as she gazed at the sleeping figure of Naruto. She commanded the sand back into the gourd. It seemed happy. Why was mother happy? Didn't she want more blood? No, there was no mother, only Gar right now. Then Nudo Ge, Gar said, feeling the countless nights she had to stay up. All at once Nudo made to move as though he didn't hear her. She stood there watching him. He was sleeping hard. No one could wake him by accident. Shish. He stared at him, waiting for the urge to kill him to return. No urge came. Why is mother silent about you? Nudo, Gar thought in her head. She wanted to know why. Revelations began to come to her. No, the beast inside of me is not mother. It was a simple revelation, one that would have been easy to make had it not been for her constant insomnia. The mystery of why and how would have to wait as Gar felt herself become ever more ready for sleep. She willed the gourd to the nearby chair and removed the sand on her person. She was vulnerable for the first time ever. She was completely and utterly vulnerable, and she felt at peace knowing that. Removing her sandals at the base of the bed, Gar wasted barely a second into hesitation as she climbed up onto the bed, curling her petite form up into a ball to take as little space as possible. Just a few hours, Gar thought, a few hours of that sweetness known as sleep. Shish. He wouldn't need much, just a few hours, and then she would go see if she couldn't talk to father. She needed more time next to this boy to find out why Shukaku was so silent when she was near him. He let her experience something she rarely got, but there was a dull warm sensation of something else entirely. Something that had wounded her so completely it scared her forehead. With her symbol good night Nudo Yamaki, she thought, drifting off into sweet sleep. 4 months, 19 days, 20 hours, 41 minutes and 13 seconds. It was dark now. Gar couldn't help but smile while her control over its cravings was gray. She craved to be free from having to constantly fight for control. Naruto had given her control twice. Now he could beat the thoughts of the demon while it was contained within her, and when the demon was in control he could beat that too. She was once a slave to Shukaku, but Nudo had freed her of those bonds by simply being Nudo Yamaki. The name brought a smile to her face as she leapt into the warm night air of Koha. Your existence is so great, I no longer need to prove mine. So she wasn't entirely sane as she jumped rooftop to rooftop towards the hospital. She began to wonder, had she traded one monster for another? True, she no longer needed blood to feed mother, but now she was crippled by sleep. She could feel its need greater now more than ever, a sleep that only could safely give her a small part of her. Also knew that she wanted to be close to him for more than just that reason, but the pragmat Gaara's only goal was sleep, that sweet sleep only Nudo Yamaki could provide. She found that she enjoyed saying his full name. Saying it somehow made him feel more real to her, more important to her. Before, when she said the full name of those she wanted to kill as a way to measure their existence, but Naruto Yamaki, it was a way to feel his existence. His window was easy, but was he asleep, floating slowly atop sand? She peered into his window. There he was, haphazardly sprawled along the bed. All of his sadness about failing to bring Sass back vanished in his sleep. The effect of simply seeing him sleep brought Gar a large amount of peace. She scooted closer as her foot hit the window edge. The freedom returned and Gar felt tired. There was no hesitation now. She removed her sandals, setting them gently to floor, and commanded her sand to rest on the guest chair. This was as close to giddy as Gar had Veer felt. She curled up on his bed once again. Sleep was coming quicker now. She was facing him. This time she thought she was in control, now that she was the one dictating her actions. So why was her arm moving up to brush Nutcake cheek? Sleep well, Naruto, Gar whispered, smiling. Raymond, Naruto replied in his Sleep. Tsunade frowned largely because it was early in the morning and she was not a morning person and Shizune was not supposed to arrive and help her for another hour or so. She needed more of a morning person to help her. She needed to check on the patients of the care retrieval team. Many of them were stable but still in critical state. Entering the yard, she saw a young pink-haired girl standing in front of the door looking eager. Tsunade-sama. Sakura chirped happily. Ah, Sakura here to visit Nudo? Tsunade asked. She paused when she looked the girl in the eyes. No, she wants something else. Tsunade thought, smiling. Yes, Sakura said meekly before her steel showed itself, but I also want you to teach me. All right, you start today. Grab a clipboard and follow me. Will I check on some patients? Tsunade waved her hand and Sakura quickly fell into step after a brief overview of her expectations for the day. They went on Tsunade's rounds. First stop, Nudo Yamaki. Largely because of dual bias of both women sliding open the door, the two were instantly confused by the sight before them. Nudo was lying in his bed snoring quietly, a bit of drool around his mouth. He looked incredibly happy and peaceful with his arms wrapped around the small redid Gaara. Their legs were entangled and the covers were discarded haphazardly around them. Tsunade mumbled and a ing and kui pinching the bridge of her nose. Tsunade began to wonder if it was a genetic thing. That's kind of cute, Sakura said, a slight blush on her face. Hold, I write that down. Tsunade's glare wasn't very good as Sakura just continued to giggle. Marching over to the sleeping pair, Tsunade eyed them directly from above. G's face was buried in Theo's chest and her hands bunched up in front of her, gripping Nito's shirt lightly. A few tear marks on the shirt and G's face indicated that she had cried during her sleep, but the soft tender smile on her face showed that she was enjoying herself. Tap tap tap. Gaara was awakened by the sudden tapping on her temple. Her teal eyes shot open. She was staring at Nutke's shirt. She felt his breath on the top of her head, his arms around her, their legs entangled. She shot her eyes towards the ceiling, seeing the half-smirk half-frowning blonde Hokage she had been briefly introduced to yesterday. Fear overcame her as she attempted to remove herself from Nut's arms. She didn't want to leave and he didn't either. A gasp escaped from her as Nudo pulled her in tighter, placing her head under his chin. I see Naruto's a cuddler, Tade said, smirking as she made a move to help the poor trapped girl, carefully removing Nike's arms from Gaara. The Hokage greeted enough of an opening for Gaara to squeeze out. Sakura and Tsunade watched with a biased look on their faces. Gaara attempted to quickly put on her sandals, her sand gower floating into place as she stood. I must be going, she said in her usually rough voice. On normal people her voice might have been able to intimidate them, but her beet red face made any intimidation tactics all flat. She made it to the door, sliding past that pink-haired girl. Sakura smiled at her. It was a knowing smile. Gaara attempted to glare at her. The glare was something that Gaara had a small amount of pride in. While it was a natural development, it had proven incredibly useful to get what she wanted. On all but the strongest and most fearsome ninja, the glare might have had some effect, but this was Sakura, the foolish pink-haired girl that had stared her down as she was attempting to kill Sasuke. Even with her demonic-induced madness, Sakura didn't back down, and now blushing and as far from Shukaku as she had ever been, Gaara didn't have any hope of staring down the girliest girl in Koha. It was humbling. I should kill her. That thought wasn't from Shukaku, no, that was a Gaara thought, one that caused her to pause. She quickly tried to remove the thought from her mind. Nudo cared for Sakura. If him mumbling her name and his sleep was any indication, another reason to kill her. Gaara's left eye twitched as that thought passed through her head. She attempted to look quicker. The firm grasp on her head forced Gaara to stand still. Her sand wasn't responding, a side effect of being so close to Nudo that was not good, but she did feel rested. Where do you think you're going, Tady said. Gaara had another thought as her face turned crimson once more. She was caught. She should just kill everyone. It was better than this embarrassment. Suna, Gaara offered weakly as she attempted to step away, only to find her face weren't touching the ground anymore. Explain why you were cuddling up against Nudo. The hawk's voice was hard and firm. There was no room to argue. The only way she was getting out of this was to explain. Sleep, Gaara said, and found that her feet once again touching the floor. She hated being so small. Gaara R turned to face Tsunade and stared into her scowling face and dancing brown eyes. My demon, she looked at Sakura. Shukaku doesn't let me sleep, and what does Nudo have to do with that? N. Rosa golden at the girl while Sakura looked to be lost in memories, perhaps of her lost comrade Sass. Bring the tune in. Exams. Shukaku wanted me to kill Nudo. She waited for retaliation or gasps. Neither happened. I tried to, but when I approached him I couldn't hear Shukaku anymore. I was myself. I could sleep without fear. Next to Naruto, Gar didn't dare look them in the eyes. She heard Sakura giggle. The Kashi always did say. Nudo slept hard enough for two, Sakura said, suppressing her laughter. Then ever since Nudo defeated Shukaku I've been trying to suppress it, and it's been working, but I needed sleep and only Naro could let me sleep. I see, Tsunade said, her face flat as she wasn't entirely certain if she should be yelling at a ninja of another village sneaking into a hospital to literally sleep with one of her injured ninja. Next time you should ask him, though I don't think he'd mind. Mir, she decided on. Gark blush returned, and you won't have to wait 5 months before you can safely sleep. She ruffled G's dark red H. Air, stop blushing, you look like a tomato, Tade said, laughing as the girl's Emin quickly turned to anger. The sand flared to life around her. My eye, just like Kha, Tade thought, laughing inwardly. Now get going, I need to check on his health. She left the still fuming Gar and amused Sakura in the hallway. Gar turned to make a quick exit. Hey, Sakura started, you should ask Naruto out. He's oblivious and you two would make a cute couple. Gar could feel her cheeks burn, the spots where he touched her naked skin without sand burned hotly. Agar said not once in her lifetime had she ever thought about being in a relationship with someone she once thought it was pathetic, a distraction before people eventually died, the ultimate sign of weakness that deserved to be purged from her thoughts. And yet the prospect of Naruto leave her without words. I'll set you up, meet us at Itaku Rmanata if you're still in village, that is, Sakura said, walking into the room. Gar nodded. She could make her team wait an extra day if need be. Tamari certainly wouldn't mind. Hey, Nudo, want to get Raymond? Sakura yelled in the other room. Gaara quickly left as she heard him wake up. We're leaving, Gar said coldly the second she walked into the quarters her team had been given by the HOK. Tamari jumped at her sister's sudden announcement. Tamari looked slightly nicer than normal. Wait, where were you last night? Tamari asked frantically. She was hiding something. She was wearing lipstick. Gar found that she didn't care. She had been awake for all of 20 minutes and all she wanted to do was to go back to sleep, but that would require Nudo, a very awake Nudo that may or may not know that she had slept in his bed, and Naruto that may or may not have wrapped his arms around her as they slept. Gar tried to frown away the blush that was reaping up on her face, but like that pink HAED girl, her blush would not be intimidated. She had felt so completely and utterly safe when she woke up this morning for all of 2 seconds before she realized what exactly was going on. Then it became a horrible nightmare where she was utterly powerless and defenseless against two of the most evil hecklers she could have encountered. Or Sore thought she was spared having all of Koha and probably all of Sun No by the end of the week. By the absence of Ino, Gar, Tamari half shouted, snapping her fingers a safe distance from Gar. Gar jumped a bit. She wasn't used to this lag, to this much thought. She was overthinking things. Where were you last night? Is somebody dead? Tamari asked, turning deadly serious. R's frown deepened. She hadn't killed for the sake of killing. Since Naro beat her, she could ignore the first part of the question, but the second part he wasn't comfortable leaving that one open to interpretation. No, Gar said slowly and dryly. Tamari's look showed that that answer wasn't going to be enough. I was sleeping, Tamari gasped, covering her mouth. I didn't feel Shukaku. How? Tamari said many other things in a minute of rambling, but those were the only ones that Gar could make out. She was so tired right now, all she wanted to do was to go back to sleep, and that would require Nudo. That meant she wanted to be near Nudo. Being near Nudo meant many things. Gaara hated feeling embarrassed. It was one of the emotions that came easiest to it was rather troublesome. She heard coming from the doorway she left open. She hadn't expected to be here this long, simply get her brother and sister and leave, but now it appeared as though fate had other plans. Is that how you greet every girl? Tamari shot back at the Eining figure. Garrett T turned and saw that it was the tired-looking boy that had lost to his sister in the Tunin exams. Gar shot her sister a look. Tamari shot one back. Only ones that make me show them around town, Shikamaru said, fidgeting with a brace for his broken finger. He regarded Gar slowly. There was that fear of her that she had been used to feeling off people she liked, that people still feared her. It was a nice feeling that some things were the same, but that was part of the problem. She didn't like the fact that she liked it when people feared her. She wanted to change that to prove that she was the demon that slept inside of her. So about the sleeping, Tamari asked in a hushed tone. Shikamaru likely her, but if he did, his face didn't care enough to show any emotion other than painstaking boredom. Gar looked at her sister. She wanted to glare away the question. The glare wasn't working. People were so much easier to manage when they were afraid. Aara began slowly, trying to find the right way to answer the question without answering too much, because the truth that Gar can fall asleep without fear as long as it's in the same bed as Naruto Uzaki was not something that the public or anybody ever needed to. No, not now, not ever found a way to sleep without Shukaku coming out short. Simple. Really, what is it? It's in Koha. Do you think we can take it back to the sand? Gar was in shock as she watched her sister's face dance with happiness. How was it possible to be so happy for someone else? No, we can't take I am to Sua, Gar said without thinking. She didn't even realize what she said until she saw Tamari's face blossom with excitement. Such overjoyed enthusiasm was rare on her stubborn workaholic sister. Gaara briefly wondered how long it would take to bury Noan's sand sister included. It's Nudo, isn't it? Shikama Ru said casually, leaning against the door. Gar gave him a look that could kill. Shikamaru backed down instantly. Look, I just saw you leaving the hospital this morning when I went to see Choji. Dara's face began to turn red as she remembered in great detail what happened less than an hour ago. That and I heard Sakura explaining to Naruto that he had a date with you. A date? Tamari half shouted. Then why did you want to leave so early? The pregnant silence filled the air as Gar glared at the wall. She was hoping that the wall would suddenly explode and she would have to fight something. Gar, are you Embera? SSED. Tamari hit the nail on the head quickly. Do you not want to go on a date with Nudo? No, it's Aara. Found herself at a loss for words. She felt Tamari's hand touch her shoulder, the sand wrapping around her sister's hand. It wasn't going to Tamari, but the sand made it known that it was watching. What do I Oh, you think of Naruto? Gar. Tamari's voice lacked any hesitation. Her fearless posture, concerned look on her face, and kindness in her voice spoke volumes to Gar as she wondered if this is what having a sibling truly felt like. Should I go or something? Shikamaru said from the door. Gar was glad it would give her just that few extra seconds to arrange her thoughts. Just sit down, Tamari ordered. Shikamaru slouched down in the doorway with a light thump as he took his sitting position in the middle of the door. Tamari's scowl at him was a temporary thing as she looked back at Gar. Tamari tightened the grip. Naruto is like me, Gar said, bringing a free hand to her stomach. To the Tori knew he grew up alone. He grew up being feared and hated like me. Gaara sighed deeply, remembering the fearful looks the villagers of the sand gave her, but he didn't give into the darkness. He's too bright. The happy, the rug on the ground was really very interesting. He showed me that it's not too late, that I could be myself. And the sleeping Tamari pred. I don't know, Gar said, still learning every fiber of the rug on the ground. I discovered it when I went to kill him. She waited for the gasps, the shock. They knew her too well. Back at the Tunin exams I was going to kill him. It wanted me to, she explained, clenching her fists at the thought of what she used to be, but I couldn't do it. Gar admitted, I tried to, but when I got close to him I couldn't hear its voice anymore. There was no need to kill, no thirst for blood for the RST time ever. I was alone. G's fist trembled slightly. Except for him, he was there and I felt so tired. So that was when you wanted to talk to father? Tamari asked, raising an eyebrow. Gar nodded. Damn, Gark thoughts exactly. I feel like I don't have to worry when I'm around him, Gar said finally, like I'm soft. And that he'll do what he can to make me happy. That's Nudo for you. He may be a pain in the ass, but he hates seeing other people suffer, Shikamaru said from the door frame. Tamari glared at him. Look, Gar, Tamari said flatly, I think that if you're able to sleep and not have to worry when you're near Nut Oh, then that's something you should hold on to, but you should do what you want to do. Okay, do what I want to do, Gar repeated back as Tamari's hand left her shoulder. Gar pondered those words as Tamari left with Shikamaru. I want to sleep, Gar said flatly, eyeing the clock, and much to her distress, sleep. Whoa. Old require Naruto. It would be so much easier if he knew about it. She wouldn't have to sneak into his room. He might even make a trip to Suna to give her some sleep. Suna, her home. The council was already talking about making her Kazekage. It had been her family's duty for generations. Now they weren't. T called of the desert for nothing. The sudden death of their father left Suna without a proper heir. Tamari was strong for Enin and smart, and Yura was strong as well, but they both lacked the willingness to be Kazekage, and they were both not strong enough. That left Gar. She was strong, perhaps the Str. Honest in the village. What better way to protect a desert than with a desert? But Gar was a demon, and many of the people she would be protecting in the sand. Gaara wanted to change that. She didn't want to be a demon anymore. She wanted to prove herself to the village as the Kazekage. Maybe she could get Naro through some political marriage. That thought caused Gar to turn bright red as she sat alone, allowing herself to calm down. Gar sighed. I should talk to Naruto, she mumbled to herself. Her own thoughts were becoming strange. Shukaku was raving at her to stay away from Naruto. That only strengthened her resolve to see Koha's container of the QB. The quick, rapid and loud knock came from the door. Gar blinked. Ninja knock. Enter. Her voice held more venom than she intended. The door slid open, revealing Lee, who quickly entered. Arisen, the Hokage, and lovely Sakuran has asked me to escort you to your date with Naruto. Lee maintained his bow as he shouted off his orders. I would also like to thank you once again for your assistance the other day. Had you not been there, I would have died. Gar stared at Lee for a moment as he maintained his bow. Lee, he had also managed to hurt her, not to the same degree as Naruto or that but Gar Fr. Lee, she had taken damage. Gar wanted to test something. Standing quickly, she walked over to the bowing Lee. Thank you, Lee, Gar said plainly, extending her small hand towards Rock Lee, but I should be apologizing for attempting to kill you before. Lee shot up and took her hand with both of his and began shaking it vigorously. Then I now consider as even. You attempted to take my life and you also saved it. Now we should be off for your date with the youthful Nudo. Lee's eyes were filled with passion and flame. Gar couldn't help but smile, well as close to a smile as he had ever given. She could feel Lee's hand and feel the warmth in his smile, but they were completely different from Nudo. Everything was different from Nudo, though he alone made Shukaku nothing more than a bad dream she had years ago, as opposed to now when she could feel a driving to kill Rock Lee. Gar was in control now. Lead the way there. It was that same gravely tone monotone that flowed from her mouth with ease. Rock Lee turned sharply and began a proud half-march, half-leisurely stroll. It was only then that she realized something about what Lee said. Not the date with Naruto part. That part was still fresh on her mind, and she would hear those words spoken halfway around the world at this point. What is Nutke relationship with the Hokage? It seemed very unusual that the Hokage would task a ninja with making sure that a date would go off without a hitch, and then there was the fact that the Hokage and Nudo were rather blonde. Naruto is the only person in the village that can call Tsunade Srama and get away with it, Lee said proudly. Then he thought for a moment, though I do not believe that they are related, as when I asked Sakuran about it, she said that Tsunade-sama had never had children. Era was relieved and then felt horrible about why she was relieved. She was relieved because Nudo was still alone just like her, but she had had a father and she has her brother and sister. No, they were different yet the same. Ar remained in silence as Rock Lee lead her through the village. Her face calm and rather disinterested, as long as she didn't think about the fact that she was actually going to speak with Naruto, as in more than a passing hello, more than a shouting match as enemies, but as a girl, as a boy. As long as she didn't acknowledge that she would be calm. Lee Gar began slowly wishing Tamari was here. She would know what to do. Tamari knew everything after all. Yes, Garizan, Lee asked as they rounded a corner. Ah, there it is, Itaku Rayon, Lee said quickly, pointing a finger at the small stall, the place where she would have her first date with Naruto. How do dates work? Gar asked. Ref. using to even remotely consider the fact that she was on a date, for if she did it was very likely that her calm composure would crumble instantly and she would run away or kill people. Leaf fro mid-stride and quickly went stiff as a board. Did he hear her brief thought about murdering people? I have nay. Veer been on a date myself, Lee said, slumping, but Jiyu sensei hasn't he told me, Lee, the most important thing to do on a date is to be yourself no matter what. Lee's posture instantly resumed its previous happy and sturdy stride. What if you don't know how to be yourself? Gar mumbled to herself. Her feet fell heavy, her stomach was twisting in knots. What if what you really are is a monster? She heard herself say there. It was the truth. She feared that she truly was what Shukaku had tried to make her. You are no monster, Gar, Lee said, smiling at her. Neither me nor Naruto think that, and there are many others that don't think that as well. They were nearly there now. A few more steps. The seats were empty. This was good. Naruto wasn't there yet. As for knowing how to be yourself, will I let you know if I ever figure that out, Lee said brightly, opening up the flap and guiding Gar in. Would you like me to here with you so you do not have to wait alone? No, Gar said flatly. She wanted to go with him, leave and never deal with Nudo again. She didn't ever want to see his face again. She took the seat and began staring intently at the hardwood and countertop. Very well, Garizan, Lee said with a strong armed salute. Best of luck on your date with Nudo and with that Lee quickly left. Did I hear him right? Garrett turned to stare at the voice. It was the woman behind the counter. She was older but still young. Are you on a date with Naruto? The woman had mirth in her eyes and a bright smile that made Gaara want to bury her in sand. She could hear the implied "my" in that sentence. Yes, Gar said shortly. She didn't intend for there to be that much venom in her food. She didn't want to give the woman a reason to poison her food. That's wonderful. The woman clapped happily. Naruto has been our favorite CU Stomer for years now. It's about time he brought a date here. My name's by the way, and yours is Gar. The woman extended a slightly moist hand over the counter towards Gar. Yes, G repeated as she slowly reached for Ankh hand. Gar remarked once again how different the touch was from Nuts. Seeing the woman was confused by her simple statement, Gar began to elaborate. My name is Gar and I do have a. She couldn't say that would be acknowledging it, that would be giving it power. No need to be shy. Nudo is like a little brother to me. I'll make sure he treats you right, said cheerfully as she began to ruas her hand as it was now ever so slightly sandy. So tell me about yourself, Gar. And Gar tried to speak but the words didn't come out. This was Nuts' sister, kind of, even if she wasn't related to him by blood like Tamari was Tora. It still meant that once again Nudo and Gar were very much alike. She was abo to speak about, to make an honest attempt to get to know this girl. That said Nudo was like a little brother, but then the world stopped. But Saku Richin, how do you know she wants to do? She heard Nudo Wynam heard it too and smiled, giving Gar a sly wink. Nudo, shut up already, she wants to. There it was, that persistent and annoying pink-haired voice. Gar wanted to bury her in sand for setting all this up. She was not allowed to the wedding. That thought turned Gar instantly red. But how do you know? She heard Nudo whine. They were closer now, so close because she's here already. Now get in there and remember what I told you. Naruto was half pushed in through the flaps. Don't screw this up, idiot. Garrett didn't even hear that. All she could hear was the sight of Nudo. He was standing therein from her. He looked exactly how he normally did, but gone was his jacket. Instead he wore a simple shirt dictating his loyalty to Kenoa. His headband was replaced by a set of bandages. She had a feeling those were there mostly to annoy him, as he didn't have any head damage last night. The thought made Gar blush. Did he know what she did? What he did? Did they tell him? If they did, Gar would have to kill them. Hokage or not, the High Garan, Naro said with a heavy blush on his face as he took the seat next to her. Compliment her, she heard Nudo say quietly to himself. She was staring hard at him. She was listening hard at him. He was the only thing in the world she could pay attention to at that moment, and she desperately wanted to pay attention to anything else. Are you letting your hair grow out because you look beautiful with your red hair? Naruto said honestly. Her beautiful. Her face felt hot. She couldn't deal with this. In an instant Gar was in a cocoon of sand sitting on the stool. Her small EGS Poking out from the bottom to the whole world. She looked ridiculous, but that didn't matter. Gar couldn't see the world, so the world didn't exist right then. That is adorable. Slowly squealed in delight. She looked at the terrified Naruto, who looked like he was about to have a heart attack. What did I do? Naruto asked frantically, looking back and forth between him and the Gar. Nothing bad. Was smiling as brightly as Naruto. Did you just made her really happy is all, and probably equally embarrassed. Looked half tempted to tap on the Gar egg with her ladle, and Naruto said slowly as began to calm down himself. His face felt really not right then, and he was probably blushing. Gar-an, are you okay? The egg was silent. Then a small part of it crumbled away. Naruto couldn't see inside of it because it was so dark, but he did try. Can you say that again? Gar's voice was like a pebble rolling down a silk curtain. Naruto blinked at the hole in the egg. While he didn't have any experience with dating, he was fairly certain that this was not normal. Oh, you're beautiful, Naruto half said, half asked, but it was all truth. It wasn't something he had ever considered before in Gar. Before, she was a bloodthirsty man. IAC, but now after seeing her again and seeing her personality change, and last night, NK blush returned full force at the thought of last night. After all that, he thought that she was really attractive. It was just something about pale reds, like he was genetically attracted to them or something. He didn't want either of them to be alone, and what better way to not be alone than together? I see. Gar's monotone voice echoed from inside the sand egg. There was a small silence before the hole wrecked itself. What should I do? Naruto asked in a panic. About the eager Harem asked with a smile. She was happy it was slow at the moment so that she could continue to watch this. Both Nudo offered. He was completely clueless. I mean, I can probably break the egg with her Renin, but that seems violent. Naruto half boasted. Just stay calm and check come out on her own. She showed up, so she clearly wants to spend time with you, said smiling. She then looked at the egg. Small finger-width lines began to appear on it. Oh hey, she's writing something too, he said smiling. He'd been listening to the whole conversation for a while now. He was very happy Naruto chose his stand to be the place for his first date, just like the time Kha dragged Minato here. When I first opened to, he thought happily, minus the sand. That is, he found himself chuckling as he prepared his special super secret love forever noodles. There wasn't anything special about them, no simple ingredients, just simply noodles that were stretched into circles and then cut. Just a small difference in how they were made, and the fact that Tui believed they were special. He had given Kha and Minato the same noodles, so he had a bit of faith. What's it say? What's it say? Naruto asked excitedly, bouncing on his seat. Smiled as she leaned in close to read the words. Let's see, it says you look good as well, Naruto. This is just too cute. Half squealed. Naruto smiled and blushed. He thanks, Naruto said to the Gar egg, but can you come out now? The egg was silent, and then the sand fell. Gar's face was once again the emotionless mask the world was accustomed to her wearing. Her body language was cool and calm. She believed that she would be able to maintain this composure for the entire date, but with the way her heart was going, she knew it was going to last. Maybe she'd have a heart attack before things got much worse. So what do you to love birds have that composure? Didn't last long at all. Perhaps if knew that she was teasing two of the most powerful shobi in the future, she might not be teasing them as much. Then again, she probably would. Era shifted her gaze to Naruto. The blush on his face brought her no small amount of relief. She wasn't going to suffer alone. He was going to cling on to Naro and drag her down the hellish emotion of embarrassment so that she wouldn't suffer alone. Order for me, she commanded Naruto. Naruto was shocked by her demand. What do you like? Naruto offered. He didn't want to give her something she hated. If he gave her something she hated, then she would hate him, and that would be the opposite of what a date was supposed to do, at least according to Naro, which was according to Sakura. Then again, she had never been on a date either. I don't know, I've never eaten ramen before. A small smile crept into Gar's face as she watched him squirm. Oh, so that's why people did it. Naruto's face twisted between shock, horror, and then finally revelation. Did he find out what she was doing? G's offense was failing and she had no defense for any form of counterattack. Well, what's your favorite food? Gaara? Naruto asked sincerely. How somebody could never have eaten ramen was a completely foreign concept to him. It was something that needed to be fixed, and Nudo sought to make it the best first experience ever. Era was taken back by the question that allowed her to collect herself once again. Salted tongue. Gar replied simply. Naruto nodded on CE as he processed the answer, trying to find something that tasted like salted tongue. Wait, humans had tongues, he had a tongue, didn't Gar used to kill people? Gar watched his Naruto's face twisted in horror. Was it something she said? What was he suddenly realizing that he didn't want to be here with and then she realized what it sounded like. How tongue? She explained, her face growing hot as she watched Nut's face twist from horror to relief. Oh ha, that makes a lot more sense. Naruto scratched the back of his head in an attempt to shake off the embarrassment that Gar began slowly. Never made me eat them. She didn't know but she needed to know that Nudo knew she never actually ate somebody. It seemed barely important enough to risk letting other people know about her fight against Shukaku. That's good, let's get you the beef ramen then. It's from a different part of the cow than the tongue. Gar almost wanted to point out that they were very different, and just because she liked one didn't mean anything, but decided to drop it. 1 meter o ramen and 1 beef ramen. Nudo shouted happily, huming right up. Said happily. She chalked up most of their conversation to ninja, and she decided that he needed to make the mood happier by being happy. It was waitressing rule number 1 on her father's training list. And then came the horrible awkward silence on the first date where neither of the two know what to say. Nut's eyes kept dancing around. It was only ramen, so he had to wait like 5 minutes tops, but for Naruto those 5 minutes felt like an eternity. He kept looking at him. Back to Gar, her face, her eyes, her hair, that lovely red hair. What was it about red hair? He was just drawn to it. It was why he thought Sakura was pretty. He settled staring at her hands. Era was like Waze having a paw nick attack. She paid infinitely close attention to the grain on the counter, its every single line a twisting, swirling maw. She so desperately wanted to pay attention anything but Nudo. She was failing that task in every sense. He saw his eyes dart around the room. Did he think was pretty? Why was he looking at her? Was something on her face? Avoid eye contact. Stare at wood. Why is he looking at my hair? Why does he like my hair? Is that all he likes? Why is he looking at my hands? So Naruto began, oh so smoothly, a bit of Svennis in his voice, just a bit like a grain of Svennis in an ocean of awkwardness. About last. The world went in slow motion. He was going to say night. He knew. Did somebody tell him? Who was she going to kill? Everybody. Everybody sounds good, very plausible option. Everybody but Nudo. She needed him for sleep. Wait, maybe she just needed his body. He was forming the end now. She could see his tongue touching the roof of his beautiful mouth. Wait, beautiful, no time to think, need to shut him up, can't hear the question, can't let him know. If she kissed him that would shut him up. Wait, what? No, that would make things worse. Waiter, sand was good. Nudo watched as the sand began to swirl around Gar. Damn it, not again. He needed to talk to her to find out what happened last night, to let her know that he enjoyed it, that it was her that stopped his nightmares last night. He needed to know that she knew, but he was bad with words. Action, he was good at action. Not again. Nudo shouted, jumping towards Gar as her sand cocoon formed around her with Nudo half trapped inside of it. Why am I so G? Gar asked herself in the darkness of her egg. She was alone with just her thoughts. Nudo was close enough that Shukaku wouldn't be bugging her. Is this what being alive felt like? So empty-headed. She literally feel herself think. So what? Nunk voice rang clearly in the darkness. She could feel his breath. How did she not notice it before? His face was so close. She could feel his heat. It was making her melt, that undeniable warmth she had felt this morning when she woke up in his arms. One of his was touching one of hers on that hand. They were touching skin to skin. Is this X? Was she going to get pregnant? So yay, about last night. Gar froze. How was she going to explain herself? How was she going to tell him that she found out that she could sleep next to him without Shukaku coming out? Only because she was trying to kill him. I don't care how you ended up in my bed, but I really like it. It was nice. Wait, what? Then you repeat that. Gar felt like she was going to ask the lot with Nudo. There was too much to process. Oh, I like sleeping next to you and waking up next to you, Naro said honestly. His leg was twitching outside of the cocoon and he couldn't really move around much. He grabbed one of G's hands with his own but the other was stuck inside the sand. There was no blush where Gar heard his words, no sense of embarrassment, no shyness. The only thing that Gar felt was a wave of utter happiness wash over her. That happiness made her do something stupid and quickly turned into embarrassment. The two Gar mumbled happily as she kissed Naruto on the nose. Nunk world went blank as he felt the rough chapped lips of Gar surround the tip of his nose. Oh, so briefly, his first kiss, his first real kiss. It was on the nose, but that didn't matter, it was real and from a girl. That last part was important. A kiss on the nose from Gar, that was more important. Oh, and she likes sleeping with him. Bonus, we should I continue our date, Naruto said once his mind was able to fully process reality again, and suddenly he was falling to the ground, but the sand caught him and gently guided him to the floor. He stood up quickly and saw Gar staring at her bowl of ramen. He saw his own. Thanks for the meal, Naruto shouted enthusiastically as he split the chopsticks. Thanks for the meal, Gar repeated, admired Naruto's splitting of the chopsticks. She saw him happily slurp up some noodles. She'd never eaten ramen before or any other kind of soup. She quickly found out that beef ramen was awesome. The thin slices of beef mixed well with the veggies and broth. She ate one of those first with a satisfying slurp. A bit of the juices slapped up into her face. She eat in surprise. She quickly looked to see Naruto smiling at her, having paused from his own meal, an act that seemed to amaze a mom. Is it good? Naruto asked hopefully. Gar simply nodded and decided that action spoke louder than words. She began slurping up rate portions of noodles. She tried everything in the dish one at a time, and then she got to a weird star with a pink swirl in the center of it. It looked like a cookie kinda, but had the texture of the egg. It was spongy. Timidly she took a bite out of it, but she heard Naruto say as soon as she bit down he quickly turned her head towards him. Was he hurt? Did somebody hurt him? Was she going to have to bury somebody? Then she saw him smiling at her. She felt her blush returning. He was pulling a joke on her. Oh, Gar asked as she finished her bite of the weird thing. It was quite tasty. You bit me, Naruto accused, pointing a finger at her with a large smile on his face. Gar blinked. She didn't understand his joke. No, I bit into this thing. Gar didn't like that Naruto was giggling at her. He should be giggling with her. That's a Narutaki. Gar blinked at his explanation. And I'm Naruto Yamaki. She continued to be Link. I see. She stared at her. Narutaki opened wide and at the whole thing. Whole Naruto's taste good, she said with a small smile on her face as she resumed looking at her own ramen. She saw his blush as he resumed eating his ramen. Oh my, squealed happily from the counter while she would never concede our ramen date romantic. These two were unbelievable cute. She blamed Ninja. She saw just floating there in his ramen, a perfect little Naraki just sitting there unguarded. Her strike was quick and sudden in a single noodle of her own ramen, trailing behind as she went for Naruto's Narutaki success. Target acquired. Delivering pack a gate to mouth. Hey, Naruto whined as he saw Gar eat his Naraki. She gulped it down. Formed a small smile on her face. Would you do that? He asked with a pout. No cannibalism. Gar deadpanned as she resumed eating her ramen. She couldn't help but smile a bit more as Artem and Tui let out a hearty laugh from behind the counter. That's mean. Gar and Naruto pouted before a smile broke out onto his face. He vaguely considered the notion of stealing one of her beef slices in retaliation but decided to let her have this victory. I'll pay, Gar said firmly. The meal was over and it was time for their first lovers' quarrel. No, I'll pay. Besides, I asked you out, Naruto huffed, pulling out his wallet. Actually, it was Sakura Haruno, Gar said flatly. Naruto blushed. So I'll pay. How about it's on the house? Tui said happily. So long as you two come back in the future, Tui said with a smile. Thank you, Gar said, bowing towards Tui. She then slowly turned to Naruto. What now? Neither of them had any idea. DSST Naruto, take her for a walk around Koha, loudly whispered at the blonde boy. Be good idea. Thanks for the free food, Naruto said happily as he opened the flap for Gar. He didn't have to lift it up very high for her. Gar was unsure of what would happen now. What would happen without the distraction of food? He found out that he hated her just like everybody else, and then she saw him smile at her. She gave him a small smile back and easily slipped under the flap. Turned to her. There her eyes sparkling with mischief. So would you offer to pay for their meals? She asked, nudging her father's Sama will pay for gossip on those two. Tui said with a small smile. Being a ramen stand owner in a ninja village, he had two currencies, money and information. Nudo was completely of everything. He was saying, his lips were moving and sound came out. It was such an easy thing to do, but he honestly couldn't remember what he was talking about. Not that he ever did. One thing though was that he remembered every single reaction Gar had to his words. He told her about the mission to wave at least Tui. Ce at this point about the fight with Orochimaru and about the time he painted the Hokage monument. Era was only vaguely aware of what Naruto was talking about. She wasn't bored by any means. She was thoroughly entertained for most of it. It was just that Nudo was so distracting and he talked so much. He talked enough for 1 3/4 people, which was absolutely fine because she barely spoke enough for a quarter of a person. Together they talked enough for 2 people. Perfect match. And she really wanted to sleep right now. She had gone years without sleeping before now. She couldn't imagine how she'd make it until night not with Nudo and such blissful rest so close. And if he wanted to hold her again, she wasn't going to complain. She wanted him to hold her now, though eyeing his hand slightly. She felt her cheeks heat up. That would be lewd, though. It was then that she became aware of the stares of the villagers. Nudo had noticed Gark's silence. It was longer than it normally was. He wanted to know what she was thinking. His nose still tingled warmly from where she had kissed him. That simple gesture would have him beaming for months. B was when he saw her turn her head, her small warm smile fading for the first time all day. She avoided eye contact like the plague. It was then his eyes slowly widened in realization, and then he too became aware of the stares they glaring at us because their thoughts echoed with one another. I attacked their village, but hers was a recent guilt of the QB and his was an old scar. I'm ruining our date. Their conclusion was in unison. The mood of Twitter. Patty left the two quickly. There they were, standing in the middle of a busy street. Parents and Ninja Likey were all glaring at them. They went out of their way to leave them alone in the cold world. Era became aware of Naruto's silence. It never lasted this long before she looked over to him fully. Seeing his frown instantly made her realize that she was also frowning now. He thought that she didn't want to be with him, that maybe she had somehow grown tired of him. Her frown deepened. To hell what these villagers thought about her, to hell what they thought about Nudo. She claimed him quickly right there in the street. Beckon quickly met Beckon before slowly entangling themselves in one another. The sand offered them privacy, encasing them in its embrace. It was going to get very hot. She smiled at him as she held his hand. Naruto to jumped as Gar grabbed his hand quickly. Garan, he asked suddenly with a half stutter. He felt her weave her fingers in between his own and grip tightly. His frown snapped into a smile. He watched in curiosity as a bit of Gar's sand covered their hands. This was their string of fate. Gark blush was an amazing thing to behold. Let's go where there are less people, Gar said with the slightest of smiles. It was a small warm thing and it made Nutke heart go pee pit pit. He silently decided to see just how big he could make her smile. I know just the place, Garan. And so Gar found herself running after Naruto as he pulled her along by their sand-encased hands. Though truth be told, Naruto had no idea where he was going. That didn't matter though, as long as he was going somewhere with Gar. They ended up at a log that served as a natural bridge near training ground 3. Their hands were still encased in sand. They were swimming in sweat. It was becoming mildly unpleasant. Archon, Nudo asked as he slowly began leading her across the log. He heard her loam. It was a quiet sound and he was grateful that they were away from all the people. Only he wanted to hear that. It was so cute. Do you mind letting my hand go? It's getting kind of sweaty. He didn't want let go of her, but he didn't want to have their hands swimming in sweat either. The sand's a little warm. Sorry, Gar said with a blush, forcing the sand down and away from them. She examined her own slightly moist head, slick with the combinations of hers and Nut's juices. It would be easy to go days without washing it in Suna. Just what was Nudo doing to her? Is this who she really was without Shukaku? I have an idea, Naruto said cheerfully. He stepped down onto the water. A soft glow separated him from the water. He was getting quite good at water walking. It was almost second nature at this point. Reaching up, he grabbed Gark's dry hand with his own and led her further down the log, the force sitting down on the log all but dragging her down with him. See, nice and dry, my butt's wet, Gar observed without complaint. Naruto looked at her and then he began to smile and Amusement which developed into chuckles. It was a slow start, laugh building with each chuckle, for it exploded into a roar of laughter. Gaara was offended for all of a second, worried she said something odd for two. She then realized what she had said before. She smiled and began joining him in his lot. It was infectious, a bubbling disease that killed sadness and brought people together. Gar vaguely wondered why nobody had ever tried to conquer the world with such laughter. It surely wouldn't be too hard, or at least much easier than force. The ark's laughter slowed as he heard Garunk laughter. He looked endearingly at her. It was a sweet and raspy sound, a pleasant combination of coldness and warmth, like coming into a warm cabin after a blizzard. Once again Naruto found that he wanted to hear that sound as much as possible. The laughter died down and both let out a heavy sigh, and then for Gar real ity crashed down. She wanted to spend as much time with Naruto as she could, but this would likely be the only time they could do it. Perhaps she was wrong about his dream. She knew what her duty was, to be the Kazekage, but what about his dream? Would he be able to follow her? Naruto Gar began slowly. She was fiddling with his thumb slightly. She instinctively gripped his hand oh so slightly tighter. What are your plans for the future? Her shoulders slumped like she had just dropped a heavy load. Naruto tensed as though she had just given him the heavy load, beside looking to the skies, noting the orange plush clouds. Well, first thing I need to do is get S back. I made a promise to Sakuran and he's kind of like my brother. You know, the sun was getting low in the sky behind them, but there was still time before it set, and after that Naruto had an innate sense of dramatic timing, or at least he liked to think he did. After that I become Hokage. That way everybody will respect and acknowledge me. What about me? Probably the worst question to ever be asked on the first date, with the exception of Rock Lee, who once asked a girl to marry him. Naruto looked at Gar with widened eyes. She was squeezing his hand painfully tight. I'll figure something out. Besides, you might get sick of me before you know it, Naruto asked, attempting to defuse the situation. He didn't want the mood to be this heavy. He really didn't want to try now. This date was the only thing that was keeping his recent failure out of his mind. No, Gar said suddenly to what he had no idea. It is your dream to become Hokage. It is something I know that you will achieve. Naruto didn't know it right then, but that was when he fell in love with Gar. She believed in his dream, she believed in him. And I'm going to become Kazekage, she muttered. That's great. Gar wek be able to bring peace to our villages, Naruto declared happily. The idea of people thought killing each other resonated in him deeply. Gar released his hand and held her own still slightly moist hand in her lap, clenching her fist. Indeed, Gar said, swallowing a lump in her throat. Her tear ducts felt moist for the first time in years. She gritted her teeth. That's why for our villages this stops after today. Her knuckles were white with Naruto. She didn't have to fear what would happen if she fell asleep with Naruto. She was able to feel emotions that she had long since oppressed, but for her village she would give that up. She would damn herself to those sleepless nights once again, but Naruto wouldn't allow that. Nope, that simple word shocked and scared Gar more than any other word she had heard. She looked deeply into his eyes to see them so full of conviction. It was slightly jarring. That gaze seemed like if he wanted the world he could go ahead and take it and nothing would stop him. It doesn't matter what anybody else says, Garan. If this is something that you want, then I will break every rule in the book to make it happen. That's the promise of a lifetime. Believe it. That was the second time he made a promise today. The chances of my village allowing it are practically zero, Gar said softly. She was touched by his words, but she didn't want to offer him false hope. So my chances aren't zero? Naruto asked, his smile growing wide. That's as good as 100%. It was called the will of fire because even smallest of sparks can ignite it in another. It was an infectious thing that if left unchecked would spread through the world like wildfire, and so Gar found herself to be one of the few ninja outside of Koha to be infected by the will of fire, because the will of fire within Naruto burns brighter than the sun. She had tried to remove his false hope. Instead, with a few words, Naruto had removed her fears and left with them hope. It was not a lie. It was not some false comfort for her to rely on in desperate times. It was a promise, the promise of a lifetime. Gar would hold and nurture her small will of fire. She would believe in Nudo, but the sudden flurry of sand Gar grabbed a hold of Naruto. He helped in surprise as his right arm was dragged out behind Gar's back and his butt was lifted oh so slightly off the log. He was dragged towards Gar, a short quick motion, and the gap between them was practically non-existent. He found his arm wrapped around her waist, his hand resting on her slight hips. She leaned into him, resting her red-haired head on his shoulder. A soft wind blew by. Thank you, Gar said with a small smile, and there in the middle of the forest in Nut's embrace a single tear, the first tear in man. Years slowly slid down her face. She allowed herself to drift off to sleep once again. She did have roughly 7 years of sleep to catch up on. Naruto just smiled as he held onto Gaara, staring at the sky as it slowly turned color. It would be starting soon. It was why he brought her out here to the idyll of the forest. Naruto wasn't naturally romantic. Shizune had told him about this spot. The boy had once taken her out here on a date during the summer. She remembered it more than she remembered the boy. Slowly the silence began to fade as the nocturnal insects began to light up. A group of toads appeared. Was that Gamakichi? It was. What was he doing here? Who were the other toads? What were they doing? The rock gently hit Nudo in the head. It got his attention as he whipped his head around. He looked forward with half-lighted eyes at the culprit. Ura was standing there in the forest, his hands makin G and OK symbol while he winked at Naruto. Naruto simply raised an eyebrow as Jura slowly vanished from sight. He waited a moment before turning to look at Gar. She was asleep oh so softly in his arms. It was almost time. He heard the toads start their croaking. It was rough at first, but then quickly too. On a more melodic sound while being complemented by the sounds of 1,000 insects sharping. Then the lights came. A soft glow from the base of the pond illuminated the whole place. Shizune had said the place glowed, but he wasn't expecting this. Then he saw a small toad swimming in the water making some kind of glowing lantern, and he smiled. Gaara wasn't half bad after all. The insect began to fly, glowing in the darkening sky, and Nudo knew what he had to do. Slowly letting go of Gar, making doubly sure that she wouldn't fall over, he stepped down onto the water. Gone. He spoke softly but loudly. Her eyes opened slowly before blinking twice and immediately locked onto his. She wasn't that into her sleep, so she'll forgive him this time. May I have this dance? He held a small hand out towards her. He only had a vague notion of dancing thanks to an impromptu mission with Ura, but that was more than most shinobi would ever have. Looked around in stunned silence. Nudo marveled at the way the light brought out the color of her eyes. She was even more beautiful. On the other hand, looked around at the scenery. She had never come across something so beautiful in her life, and the fact that she was experiencing it with him made this the best day of her life. I don't know how. G blushed slightly as she slowly took Nut's hand. She slid down onto the water from the log. Her sand stopped the water from touching her feet, and she found herself floating an inch above the water, staring right into Nut's eyes. Naruto chuckled. That's okay, follow my lead, Nudo said with a smile. It was just like the lady he had to dance with during that mission. Da watched with a smile as he saw Naruto lead Guard through the dance that he had taught the boy. It was a simple enough 4-step dance. He had a feeling that if he wrote T's down and put it in one of his books that it would be a fan favorite scene, but he couldn't do that to Minato and Kushina, and he wasn't going to do that to Naruto and Garby. Remind me of them, you know, Gaara said as he felt Tsunade appear beside him. She sighed. There must be something in Namikaze blood that makes them fall in love with red-haired for ninja that have a demon in them, Tsunade said with a twitching eyebrow. She then smiled at the duo. The TOS, your touch and the lights, Gaara said softly. Dance too. Had a feeling that Brat would end up benefiting from knowing how to dance. He hadn't turned to face Tsunade yet. He was lost in the past as he watched Nudo twirl Garo so gently over the water. You know, if your dates were as nice as this, I might have actually gone out with you once, Tade said with a small smile. Watching those two was like taking a trip back in time. Gaara shifted his gaze and looked into Tsunade's eyes. At that statement, who's to say for you they wouldn't be Tsunade time? She wanted to punch that smile off his face. Nudo, Gar said after dancing for an unknown amount of time. The moon was full above their heads and the water beneath their feet glowed a soft H. It sounded like their Toad Band was beginning to get tired as well. What is it? Gaara and Naruto asked, stopping their dancing movements. They had been doing the same 4 steps over and over again, but neither one of them cared about that. I'm tired. Boruto smiled at that. He was feeling tired too, and he hoped that being tired would mean they would be sleeping in the same bed again. Can I stay with you? Garunk voice was a distant thing as she was already beginning to feel the lulls of sleep. Once again she let out a soft squeak as Naruto quite literally swept her off her feet. Of course Gaara, Naruto shouted excitedly as he sped off back towards Koha. He had never been so excited to go to bed before. Ar resisted the urge to call him an idiot. Gripping his shirt tightly she began to drift asleep. It came so easy to her now. The thought of accidentally falling asleep when she was away from Naruto terrified her, but she would be strong. At least until the next time she ran into Naruto. Naruto had briefly considered taking Gaara back to the hospital, but that place was creepy. He had vaguely considered finding out where Gaara stayed, but Tamari and Kanguro both scared the piss out of him, so that only left his apartment, his messy unsanitary boy smelling apartment. Never before had Naruto wished that he kept his apartment clean. When he arrived at his home he saw a note on the door. As he slowly maneuvered Gaara around so he could grab the noted in the girly handwriting he knew it simply read Boom Mishish. Opening the door Naruto came in to see his apartment nearly spotless. He made a mental note to thank Sakura later. He quickly navigated his way to his room. Gaara's petite frame still in his arms. He opened his door to his bedroom. His sheets were clean. All the garbage on the floor was gone. There was no random boxers. It was simply clean and still. His judging by the giant Raymond poster near the bed. He really needed to thank Sakura later. Gently setting Gaara down on his bed he began his nightly ritual. It mostly involved brushing his teeth and changing into his sleepwear. He wondered if Gaara would be okay by herself for just a few minutes. When he returned he saw G's gourd sitting off in the corner. He vaguely wondered where that was. The whole day he saw Gaara sitting up in his bed, her cold green eyes wide with fright. Where were you? Gaara asked, the fear in her voice palpable. She was very good at knowing fear. She could taste it and smell it on others. She could taste her own fear. It made her stomach twist. Brushing my teeth, Naruto said, sitting on the bed next to her. She slowly reached out to touch his arm as though appearing to make sure that he was real. It's dangerous to leave me while I'm sleeping, Gaara said flatly, getting an apologetic smile out of Naruto. She was so relieved that he wasn't some figment, that this whole thing wasn't some vile constructive shukaku to get her to drop the guard she had so carefully been building up. She stood up suddenly, grabbing one of Nut's shirts and walked to his bathroom. Remember that in the morning. Naruto chuckled and began to make himself comfortable in his bed. Well, his bed wasn't the biggest it could fit two, but he had a feeling he was going to be used as a teddy bear tonight. He was becoming surprisingly okay with it. Not that he was a teddy bear, his manly pride would not permit such a title. Era walked in a few minutes later. Naruto would never have thought that seeing a girl wearing one of his shirts would make him so happy. It was an odd sight. Well, he wasn't the biggest boy, Gaara wasn't the biggest girl either, so she was comfortably floating in one of his t-shirts. She sat down next to him. He could smell the mint mouthwash on her breath. Era was nervous before. Naruto had been asleep and completely unaware that she was sleeping next to him. Now she had literally asked him. She had his permission to sleep next to him, so why was she so nervous? Would he put her arms around her again? She hoped so. Though she only got to enjoy it for the briefest of moments before that blonde HOK forced them apart. You think too much, Naruto said, slowly pulling her down next to him. Gaara could only blush as she got her wish with the arms. She quickly found her face buried in Naruto's chest, her bare legs tangled with his pajamade legs. She wiggled her arms around Naruto's torso and hugged him tight as he draped his arm around her. Good night, Gaara. Good night, Naruto. Sleep took them both within moments, the world going to a peaceful sleep, finally giving solace to two lost souls. In the morning Naruto awoke to a Gaara's bed. A simple note was taped to his forehead. He also felt like his nose had been kissed. The writing was crude and simple, nothing unnecessary in its calligraphy. Oro, I have taken one of your shirts and jackets with me. If you wish to have them back, come to Suna. Gaara. She didn't really need to sign it. Gar, what gives? Kanguro finally asked. They had left Koha 2 hours ago and Gar kept looking down at an orange-wrapped cloth and was smiling, legitimately smiling. Quite frankly, it was creeping Kanguro out. This was because from his memories, whenever Gar smiled or showed any pleasing emotion for that Adder buddies piled up. Why do you keep smiling and what are you holding? Blinked at her older brother, her face becoming a stoic mask. Rather quickly she squeezed the orange parcel that she had been given by Naruto. Well, technically she stole it from him, but she doubted that Naruto would care, so she considered it a gift from him, the precious gift from Naruto. She should get him something, but what would be a good gift for Naruto? She doubted that he would be able to wear any of her clothes. She smiled at the thought, a soft warm thing that had long ago melted her once frozen heart. You're doing it again, Guro said gruffly, his eye twitching seriously. This was creeping him out. Gar's smile was instantly replaced by a frown at her brother's words. Temari smirked. Gar had a date yesterday, she said in a practically singing voice. Anuro blinked twice. This was insane. Wait, what? He asked calmly, not believing his ears. Yep, Temari giggled. She had a date? No, seriously, what did she do? Kanguro asked, not believing it for 1 second. Now he was going to understand if she killed someone, but a date? That's ridiculous. Era scowled, prompting a light laugh from Temari. Seriously, she actually went on one? Really, with one? Oh. Those leaf losers? Kuro asked, his mouth gaping, and shock realization hit him. His scary little sister went on a date with someone and was smiling. Wait, Gar went on a date? They're kinda slow on the uptake, aren't you? Temari groaned. Honestly, even she could understand Kuro's befuddled face. The good thing was that she knew earlier. The Mari went on one too, Gar said flatly, keeping her gaze straight ahead. It really didn't matter what her brother thought about Naruto. Well, it kind of did. She helped her brother got along with Naruto to some degree. She hugged Nut's jacket slightly tighter. She had made sure to empty the pockets when she took it. She didn't even know why she took it, probably to make him come get it. She doubted that she would give it back to him even if he asked. It was hers now, just like he was. Dara's face flushed a tinge of red. She could feel every spot he touched her burn at the simple thought of him again, which was now most of her arms, legs and face. She never wanted to stop burning, and Kuro just kept gaping in shock at his two sisters. Just a trip to the leaf and they had already gone on dates. Why did it seem like he was missing out on something? He couldn't even muster up a word. It wasn't a date, Temari shouted. Gaara then glared at Kanguro. Tamar's cheeks were also tinged a slight pink. It wasn't like she liked that idiot leaf boy anyways. He was such a smartass. But why don't you tell us about your date with Naruto? Gardiri asked, hoping to change the conversation away from her own activities. She didn't want Kuro to know that she had spent hours yesterday watching the clouds pass with that idiot. He took me to eat ramen, Gar said slowly. The beef ramen she had was good, but her favorite part of it was the naris, for several reasons, only one of which pertained to the name Kuro could make out. Gar continued, and then we walked around the village for a little bit and talked. Oh, what did you two talk about? Temari asked. Gar didn't face her sister, but she could feel Tamari's eyebrows move up and down in a suggestive manner. Gar paused for a moment. What did they talk about? She honestly couldn't remember. She remembered being with Naruto in the village. She remembered the glares of the villagers. She remembered the feel of his hand in the village and her asking to go somewhere more private. You don't remember, do you? Temari asked, sounding disappointed. He held my hand and smiled a lot, Gar said proudly, to which Tori sighed. She really wanted details to Gar, though that was the important part of their city walk, the hands, the touching and the smiles. Bara glanced down at right hand. It burned and she gave it a gentle squeeze, smiling at the effect. Just what had Naruto done to her? She could see his eating grin staring at her knowingly from afar. And after that, Temari asked, giddy, cutting her from her thoughts. Temari knew Garrett didn't come to their room last night. That meant that her little sister more than likely slept in Nutke bed again. The villagers glared at me. I think EY still resent us for attacking their village, Gar admitted sadly. So he took me to a lake somewhere in the forest. I told him I was going to become Kazekage. He told me he was going to become Hokage. So you're going to accept their offer? Temari asked as an afterthought, implying the offer that the The elders had given Gaara a week prior. Gaara nodded her head exactly once. Shame that he said on becoming Hokage, then I doubt you'd be able to spend more time with him. Then Tori sighed. The one guy that could let Gaara sleep was of course going to be out of her reach. He told me not to worry about that, so I won. Gark's smile was genuine enough to affect Tamari. Tamari looked stunned at the confident look on her face. It was really a good thing that Naruto came into her life. She knew it at that moment, but they couldn't do for her throughout. In Suna, Naruto had done in days. Thino had regained most of his bearing. And spat out a scowl on his face. PFF, that loser has about as much chance of becoming Hokage as I have of becoming Kazekage. Tamari glared at her little brother but stopped when she heard Gaara's soft chuckle. As long as his chances aren't zero, it's as good as 100%. Gaara quoted Naruto, a fond smile on her face. Besides, he gave me a promise of a lifetime. She clutched Narc jacket once more. I'm going to believe in him. Diri smiled fondly. Now she wanted to meet Naruto properly to thank him. He really changed their lives indefinitely. Soon as who knows what might have happened to the village under a blood thirsty Gaara, but now she didn't need to worry about it. Still, Kuro sighed. For a loser like him to become Hokage, the village would have to be pretty desperate. Then Kuro, that loser beat me in a fight and I'm about to become Kazekage, Gaara said flatly. Tamari laughed out. Kuro's eyes widened slightly and was silent for a while. After that, Gaara smiled at his silence. She had given him something to think about. It had been 6 months since Naruto and Gaara had left the village for their training. She already missed the idiots. Fortunately, Sakura was proving entertaining enough. She had pushed the girl hard than she did Shizune, and by a far margin. Perhaps she pushed the girl Loon fairly hard, but Sakura had not only stuck with it, she was excelling at it. But that wasn't why she was sighing. She was sighing because right now she wasn't a teacher, she wasn't a doctor, she was the HOK at the moment, the Sandwa NTED something, and they had sent an emissary probably to do with their announcement as of who the next Kazekage was, as well as the remainder of the details about their alliance. Tsunade-sama, Shizune called out from the door. The emissary from Sand is here, let them in. Shizune. Tsunade called out. She was desperate for that sake bottle. She wanted it so bad she rained down curses on Shizune for hiding her stash. I mean, who does that? Shizune quickly walked in with Tamari and Shikamaru walking close behind. Tsunade had made Shikamaru the Sand emissary's official escort, largely because he had the most experience in dealing with them and was smart enough not to mess anything up. She shivered. Had she given Naruto a job of that sort, that was calamity waiting to happen. Okage-sama, Tamari said with a low bow. I am Tamari of the desert here, and I'm here on behalf of Suna to inform you that my sister Gaara has been selected as the 5th Kazekage. Tamari pulled out 3 scrolls. Want him also to deliver these 3 scrolls to you? Well, let's have them. Suede said. Foregoing formality, Tamari was easy to deal with, reminded her of herself at times, and not because of the blonde hair. Tamir quickly handed the scrolls to Sue. Nade. The green scroll or details of the alliance between our 2 villages, as well as proposal of sorts, Tamari said with a light blush. Tsunade raised an eyebrow at that. Okay, now she wanted to know. The red scroll is an invitation to Gaara's coronation as Kazekage. Well, the blue one is a personal request from the future Go Kazekage. All right then, Tsunade said, breaking the seal on the alliance scroll. First, is there anything else? Tamari, the blonde Sand girl, jumped at a casual tone. Yes, I have another scroll to deliver to Naruto Uzumaki, and I'm also supposed to wait for your responses to the invitation and request, Tamari said firmly. Her back straight Tati made her nervous. She was talking to a woman that could level a mountain with a single punch. Sure, she could clear-cut a forest with her fan, but crumbling a mountain was so much more impressive. Sadly, Naruto is on a 3-year mission, Tsunade said, frowning. Though I can attempt to send him the scroll during the next report. Tamari frowned for a moment before nodding and placing a second blue scroll on the desk. Tsunade commented, looking it over. I'll give you my answer to the request later in the day, but I believe I'll be able to attend the coronation. Tate offered with a smile. Now have Shikamaru escort you to some place nice. Troublesome, Shikamaru muttered as he bowed, following Tori out of the door. Tsunade skimmed over the alliance scroll looking for anything that caught her eye. She didn't want to read it in detail. T was for someone like Shizune and Kakashi to do something caught her eye towards the end of it in order to further solidify the bonds between our villages. The Council of Elders of Suna requested dual political marriage. We offered to Mari of the desert to be wed to any citizen of Koha you desire well. We wish to wed Nudo Yamaki to our future Kazekage. Gaara of the desert. Tsunade laughed. Gaara certainly works fast, she said out loud, waving Shizune over to read the paragraph as well. Shizune's eyes widened. It was comical, the Hokage and her assistant giggling like high school girls. Oh my, are you going to accept? Shizune asked, hugging Tauntaun tightly to her chest. Only if Naruto and Temari agree to it, but I doubt that either will do it. Those two love their villages too much, Tsunade explained as she rolled the scroll back up. Everything else seemed to be in order. The red scroll for Gark invitation was straightforward and formal. You are formally invited to attend the coronation of Tsunade closed that scroll quickly. She smiled as she began reading the Gaara's personal request. Dear Lady Tsunade, Hok of Koha Iar of the desert would like to request that should you accept the invitation to my coronation, you bring Nudo Uzumaki in addition to your entourage. Should you be unable to attend my coronation, then I would like to request a personal mission of have Naruto Uzumaki attend the event. Should the not be possible, then I will still request a mission for him to come to Suna as soon as possible. You are no doubt aware of the relationship me and Nudo have, as you are also part of the cause of it, for which I thank you deeply. You are also aware that Shukaku, the demon inside of me, does not allow me to sleep. The sole exception to that is when I am near Nudo. That is why I am requesting this. No secret plot to steal your villages in Chui or future Hokage, just a simple need for sleep. It has been 6 months, and as you are no doubt aware, preparing for the position of KAG is rather tiresome, but utmost gratitude. Gaara of the desert. Godi Kiktade smile, reading it well. It's going to be a long 2.5 years. For Gartade let out a laugh as she closed the scroll. She eyed the third scroll with a deep hunger. A message to Naruto. Shizune gasped as Tsunade grabbed the scroll and began opening it. Lady Tsunade, that's Naruto's private mail, Shizune said, stomping her feet. It's rude for you to go through so much in private like that. Hey, I'm curious, and I'd hardly call mail between ninja from 2 different villages private, and besides, why are you beside me if you do not want to read it? Tady smiled. Shizune had conflicted face before it shifted to one of resignation. Protocols be damned, this was her little brought her on the line here. Tsunade chuckled and opened the scroll and stared at the 4 words that were written inside. Nudo, I'm tired. Gaara. Tsunade howled in laughter, to which Shizune chuckled lightly, smiling fondly. Leaf ninja were very generous. Gaara used as the ninja from Koha left, they had stayed for her coronation, and all 4 of them except one had brought her a gift from the Hok herself, a bottle of sake. Tade said that because she was Kazekage she could lower the drinking age if she wanted, if it existed in Suna. Ar didn't like the idea of drinking. She liked being in control of herself. If she ever wanted to not be in control of herself, all she had to do was stop resisting Shukaku, so the sake would sit unused in the quarter somewhere. Chisun, Tsunade's assistant, had given her a set of books, one of which was on how to cook ramen. It seemed even people in Koha were trying to set her and Nudo up. He really didn't mind it. At least a ninja and Koha were more concerned about her happiness than the political importance of a marriage between her and Nudo. Sakura, the current apprentice of the Hog. Sakura had gotten Gaara a large orange teddy bear with a yellow swirl on its stomach. It had glassy blue buttons for eyes. Sakura's logic was simple and innocent. She knew that Gaara slept well while Naruto was around, and the stuffed bear reminded Sakura of Naruto a bit. What on earth was she going to do with a stuffed bear nearly the same size? She was the Tsunade's designated bodyguard, was the exception. Kashi hadn't gotten Gaara anything, which was fine because she didn't expect anything in the first place. He was the only Koha ninja that wasn't a gift-giving freak, so why was there a box sitting on her bed when she entered a room? Who put it there? Going through it, she noted a note on the box. I understand that you and one of cute little Genin are attempting a relationship of sorts. I support this fully, as does Naruto's other sensei Gaara. He asked me to find some way to give these to you. He believed they may be helpful to you and Nudo, and I must say I am quite jealous. Bashi Hadaki Jonin of Koha PS Du En Ot let Tsunade find out who gave this to you. Our lives are in your hands. If Gar had eyebrows they would be raised at the odd note she would have preferred if he hadn't given her a gift. Opening the box, Gar saw another set of books. She did have more time than most people to read each. Gar pondered innocently grabbing an orange book from the box. She flipped to the first page. Gar flopped down onto her bed, face panting into the largely unused and still soft mattress. A layer of dust from lack of use flew up from the covers as she made impact. It had been 2 months since she had laid down on the thing. 2 years 5 months 26 days 14 hours 15 minutes and 67 seconds. Gar sputtered out the time since she had last seen Naruto. She knew he was away on a 3-year mission and she was making sure that the Hokage knew that she required Naruto to arrive at Suna at the soonest possible moment. It wasn't exactly true that Gar couldn't sleep without Naruto. She could just get a good night's sleep with him. She could sleep next to him as long as she wanted without fear of Shukaku breaking free. Before she alone she could maybe get 15 minutes every few months, but now she had a secret weapon that allowed her to eat 4 hours every 2 months. It was a mere pittance of how much she was going to sleep when she got her hands on Naruto once again, though there were other things she wanted to do with him as well. Something involved the bed but not sleeping in it. She blushed. Era had decided about a year ago that the next time she saw her blonde ninja that she was going to kiss him. No, that was wrong. They were going to share a kiss. The places he touched her still burned with a comfortable heat at the thought of him. It made her spine tingle in her lower back. She wanted her whole body to burn. En-chan. Gar called out to he. Our secret sleep weapon. Turning her head towards the chair where she kept it, she sat up and gasped. Ner-chan. The large stuffed bear Sakura had given her was sitting in its chair naked. She had dressed it up in nutcase jacket and shirt after her coronation when Tsunade had told her about Naruto's training. It was an act of desperation, but it did the job oddly enough. But now Nuran wasn't Nuran without the jacket and shirt. Someone was going to be killed today. Frantically, Gar got out of bed and began frantically searching her room. She pulled clothes out of her dresser, scattering them on the ground. Reckless abandon. No. Gar began shouting frantically. She quickly darted out of her room, colliding with Tamari. Gar, what's wrong? Tamari asked, concerned for her normally stoic sister. Ner-chan is naked, Gar said, completely serious. Only Tamari and Kanguro knew about Gar's secret weapon and she meant to keep it that way. Tamar's eyes widened. Oh, that's what that was, Tamari said, looking away from Gar. Was what, Tamari? Gar asked. The sand began to fly around her. Someone really was going to die today. I saw Kanguro with something orange early today. He said he was. Tamari didn't get the chance to finish. As Gar had practically flown out the door in a swirl of sand. Good luck, little bro. I think you're going to need it. Anuro smiled to himself as he eyed his project for his little sister. He had just finished it and it was perfect. Now he just had to give it to her tomorrow. His door was blown off its hinges, destroying one of his prototypes unless his sister wanted her gift. Now that is where is it, Kanguro? Gar said with pure malice in her eyes. She was still very good at scaring people when she needed to, and even Kanguro, who knew that his sister would never kill him, still feared for his life, especially right now. He could see the white of her iris all the way around her pupil. Kanguro gulped. Happy birthday, Kanguro said, presenting his present to Gar. Gar blinked as she stared at what was before her. Her brother had made a human-sized puppet a few good inches taller than her. Not exactly impressive, considering she was shorter than most, but it had blonde hair with soulless blue eyes and painted-on whisker mark on her cheeks. It was wearing Nito's clothes. Her eye twitched, presenting Mary-chan to Zero. Kanguro said proudly, complete with automatic hugging action. He pressed a wooden panel located Omar on the contraption and it sprang to life, its arms and legs forming to rather large circles that could be mistaken for a hug of death. So what do you think? The furious S around her died down as she walked towards the puppet, a deep frown on her face. Gar wordlessly removed the jacket and shirt from the puppet before turning around sharply. Burn it, Gar commanded as she exited the room. But I worked so hard on it, Kanguro pouted. Gar turned one last time looking at him. Kuro ghoul, burn it. Why yes, 3 years 2 days 18 hours 4 minutes and 20 seconds. That's how long it had been since Gar had last seen Naruto Yamaki staring up into the cold night sky of Suna. She wondered how much he had changed. He was probably much taller than her, probably stronger too. He probably grew up as well. She certainly had. She was a little girl when she first met Naruto. Now she was a slender young woman. She was still short. Rely an inch past 5ta fact that made dealing with certain old ninja twice as difficult as they needed to be. She had developed gentle womanly curves on her Lee frame as well due to her flowing Kazekage robes. She appeared to simply be a straight blob, not that Gaara ever tried to flaunt her slender frame. That was for only Naruto if he pleased. Their most noticed feature was her hair. It had only grown to a deeper red over the years, moving from blood to a soft desert rose red. True to herself, she made promise when Naruto complimented her hair all those years ago. She hadn't cut her hair. It was a mistake. He lived with daily. The dry desert hair made hair frizz out of control. There was a reason why most Suna women kept their hair short, but due to her lack of sleep, Gaara had plenty of time to maintain her hair, a ritual that she had begun to enjoy. It was odd caring about something so feminine, but Naruto liked her hair, so she was going to make sure that he still liked her hair when he got back. Right now her hair was done in a long braid that reached the small of her back. However, she commonly wore it over the front of her shoulder. The extra distance made the braid end just below her bosom. She liked to play with it. Her lack of sleep also gave her plenty of time to read the book she had gotten from Kakashi. She knew how to make raiment well now, at least according to Mitsuri. She was G's one-time student and one of her few friends. Mitsuri was also the only other person to know about Gaara's other literature, a hobby they both shared. It was truly divine. Any day now, Gaara said, twirling her braid. Temari was in Koha at this very moment, preparing for the Tunin exams as well as keeping an eye out for the future Hokage of Koha. She was under express orders to inform the blonde just how desperate Gaara as to see him. Gaara vaguely wondered if that wouldn't be evident by the 23 scrolls likely sitting in Naruto's mailbox, all from her, one of which threatened his immediate death if the first thing he did when he returned was not to come see her. She froze. Someone was attacking her village. All thoughts of Naruto vanished from her mind. All her desires for sleep were replaced with a fierceness to protect her village. She was the Kazekage after all. 3 years, 2 days, 18 hours, 52 minutes and 11 seconds. Suddenly becoming aware that you very much exist was something Gaara had only done NCE before. The first time was when she first discovered the effect Naruto had on her, and now, for a second time, Gaara was aware that she existed. Her hand felt heavy. She eyed it curiously. At least she had hands. That was better than not. She looked around, noting the white void she was surrounded by. She saw herself alone, so very alone. It was a feeling beyond crushing. She was going to be eternally and forever alone. The right hand moved to her face. Tears. How long had it been since she cried? Had she ever? She felt the cold tears streaming unsto down her face to her lips. They were salty and bitter. She looked hopelessly to the void. Naruto, was he all right? What was he doing now? Where was he? Just when she had finally made a connection, it was cruelly ripped from her hands. Was it fate? Was this destiny? Eren, a voice shook her reality. The void she felt slowly dissipating. Her nightmare of being alone shifted into a dream. She felt a familiar calmness in around her, a hopeful gaze spotted on her face. Feeling a hand on her shoulder, she sighed in liberation. She knew who it was, but she wouldn't smile until she saw his smile. Gaara turned to face him, noting his blonde hair and grin. He had grown even more handsome. She smiled at him. Naruto spoke her name with happiness. Naruto was seen besides her, sitting on the void. He was with her. That was what mattered. They didn't care where they were, even if they were within the grasp of death. They were together. That was what counted. The Naruto that was the only thing besides her that existed. He stood up, removing his hand from her shoulder. She stared at him, and all looking at his hand offered to her like a child. She took it. Eren, she heard Naruto say with his voice sounding clearer despite the ringing in her ears. Gaara's eyes shot open and was blinded by the bright blue sky, but she kept them open. Her mouth pulled into a smile all on its own. She blinked once, letting her eyes adjust as she stared at Naruto Yamaki. She could feel his hand at her back, holding her up while his other gripped her hand. It was close enough to a hug. He was smiling at her now, his hand gripping Hers the touch said everything, sorry for not being there, sorry for leaving you, sorry for letting you die. Arch is then and there to act on the promise she'd been keeping to herself for years now. Her free hand on the outside of their two bodies found itself behind Nito's neck. She wasn't quite strong enough to pull herself all the way up to him, nor was she strong enough to bring him down to her, so they met in the middle. The greatest sense of existence that Gaara ever felt rushed through her. This wasn't the cute naive kiss of innocence, this was the passion-filled kiss of youth. Their lips were hard and chapped, prickling against one another, but they were oh so soft, oh so perfect. The world fell away from them. She was no longer Kazekage, he was no longer a ninja from a different village. There was no Akatsuki and they weren't ninja. She was Gaara, he was Naruto, and they were together, closed out to E-world. The kiss was a promise of more, a promise of so much more than any words could hope to describe to Gaara. It was a reminder that what she felt for Naruto wasn't just her clinging to the first person to make her feel, it was real. The Naruto, it was a confirmation that after all this was over. After Akatsuki was dealt with, after SK was back in Koha, that he could have real happiness. Their hopes and dreams were poured into that kiss. Slowly Gaara pulled away, rather contented with her first kiss. She rather liked the completely stupefied look on his face. His half-lighted eyes blinked once to regain his composure before that stupid grin broke onto his face. Wow, that was all he could say, all he needed to say right then. Everything else was said in that kiss. Why wow, Gaara said, smiling back at him. The hem, that was the sound to get their attention, the sound that made them both realize that they weren't the only ones around, came from Temari, clearing her throat. The eldest of the Sand siblings was standing before them, an incredibly amused smile on her face. Behind her were the shinobi of the Sand, looking with gaping mouths at their Kazekage. Well, Kanguro could make out Dar's face turned a bright red, a deeper red than anybody save Naruto had ever seen her turn. She sucked in her upper lip, looking at ninja before her. They were crying, they were celebrating because she was alive. They were her ninja. They came to try and save her, and they were rewarded by show of her kissing some leaf shinobi. They all came to try and help you, Gaara, Temari said, taking the final few steps towards Gaara and Naruto. Temari extended a hand towards her prone sister, a look of pride and relief on her face. Gaara took the hand, allowing Temari to pull her up and out of Naruto's grip. She stood for a second. Naruto did let her fall. Her legs were steady and she found herself using his shoulder to stand upright. Who knew coming back to life would be so tiring? Thank you, Naruto. Gaara allowed herself to lean on him just a bit more than she needed to, a small innocent enough gesture, the realization that the honored grandam other chunk life was given so that Gaara could live did in her. But when Sakura told her what Gio's last words were, Gaara couldn't help but smile. She would make sure the dream came true. Gio's words filtered through. This is for the world of peace that you and Gaara can make with love instead of the world of hatred. My generation left you with one look at Naruto, the boy turned man that had dragged her out of the darkness and into light. Gaara knew that if anybody could do it, it would be Naruto. He had the undeniable presence that would make the impossible possible. He was really taller now. It only bothered Gaara slightly, as it would be much more difficult to kiss while they were both standing. She'd have to climb him ever so slightly or drag him down to her level, neither of which would be too hard, just slightly annoying. R's pride as Kazekage forced her to walk. She couldn't run at high speeds right now. Her body was simply drained. Considering she was dead just a few hours ago, she would say she was doing fine. She kept wandering to and away from the Naruto. He kept making her knees weak when he smiled at her, and she kept feeling the temptation to curl up and fall asleep. No one will think any less of you. Tamar's voice shocked Gaara out of her half-asleep stupor. Gaara looked at her smiling sister. There was a bit of mirth in her eyes, but there was also happiness. Behind Temari was Mitsuri, making obscene gestures with her hands while pointing at Naruto. Gaara had no idea that you could act out an entire scene from it, Ida, with just your hands. Several other ninja were also smiling at her. Yes, there was mirth. Yes, they were going to tease her, but in each of their eyes were admiration and companionship. Gaara was vaguely wondering if every ninja and Koha and Suna was trying to get her and Naruto together. Aside in defeat and guided herself closer to the blonde ninja. He had saved her twice, now she needed to return that favor in her own Gaara way. He smiled as she drew near to him. It was fortunate that it was so easy for her to make him smile. She tugged on his sleeve. Naruto. Gaara began, her eyes already drooping. I'm tired. She was vaguely aware of the fact that Naruto had swept her off her feet and was holding her bridal style. Her head lolled as she began to fall asleep. She saw Mitsuri and Sakura giving her a subtle thumbs up. She heard Rock Lee shout about youth. Rest up, Gaara, Wek get you home soon, Naruto said, smiling down at her. For once Gaara was quite happy with how small she was. She wouldn't be such a burden to Naruto and he'd be able to carry her for a while. It was relieving. Thank you. And just like that, Gaara was asleep in Nutke arms once again. It only took him 3 years. Jerk anytime, Gaara. Naruto smiled down at the sleeping Reddit in his arms. She had become cuter. It seemed like some Reddit sand chipum. She was different and yet the same. There was less shyness in what she did, less innocent curiosity, especially if he thought about that kiss. That kiss was something Naruto wanted to do over and over and over and over again. Nut's mind drifted to the scrolls in his bag. He kept a few of his favorites from Gaara, including the one that threatened his immediate death should he not come visit her. It was rather sweet in a murderous psycho kind of way. If you hurt her, I'll kick your ass, Kanguro said as he walked within shoulder bumping distance of Naruto. Naruto had been wondering when Kanora was going to finally speak his mind. He nearly made it scot-free without having to deal with him. He had nothing against Kanguro, he just knew what was coming. It was a rare bit of foresight on Nark's part, but he was quite good at seeing patterns. Eventually, you're fifth on the list, Naruto replied rather dry. He shrugged. Not like they could kill him. He was Uzumaki freaking Naruto, he thought smugly. Fifth, Kanguro asked. He was actually angry at Naruto by any means. He was just doing it because it was kind of a big brother thing to do. Right, and if he read the situation right, he'd never be able to intimidate one of his sister's boyfriends if he didn't at least try with Naruto. It was actually rather thankful for Naruto. The boy gave him his little sister Ba first as Gaara. The sleeping reed shifted in his arms slightly at her name Clutc. Hing his shoulders slightly tighter. Next I guess is Tori, then Sakuran, then Granny, and then there's you. After you is that Mitsuri lady, said Brunette. Gave Kanguro a thumbs up before returning to conversing with Sakura. How am I fifth? The ordering of the list confused him greatly. Scariest person first, Naruto said, laughing sadly. Why were all the women in his life utterly terrifying? Ninja, that pink-haired girl is scarier than me and your grandma. Kanguro was at least kind of grateful he was scarier than Mitsuri. Gur had learned from Gaara, but she lacked any sense of intimidation. Naruto stopped midway. ND turned to Kanguro, who gained a slight shiver at the look from Naruto. She punched the ground and it wasn't ground anymore, Naruto said, facing Kanguro with a disturbed look on his face. She has monster strength now. She got it from Granny. Naruto. Gark tired voice echoed from his arms. Shut up. Naruto did he was told and immediately sucked on his bottom lip. You're so whipped, Kakuro said, laughing. He got about one good chuckle out before he saw a single glare green eye of his sister Bakuro. Gar said, slightly more awake now. Shut up or and kill you, Naruto snorted. Kanguro immediately backed away, wondering why he got the death threat while watching Gar wrap her arms around Naruto's neck and shifting into a more comfortable position. Gar gave Naruto a short kiss on the cheek before snuggling into his shoulder. The answer was simple. Gar was also whipped. Naruto glared at the slowly rising form of Suna's main gate. It was moving. He thought at first that it was the desert playing a trick on him, a mirage, but then as he grew closer he saw them. Nearly every citizen of Suna was out on their walls coming to greet them, to greet Gar there. Kazuka. Naruto felt a bit of pride for Gar, then he jostled her in his arms, waking her from her partial slumber. She immediately glared at him. Wake up, Gaara, he said happily. Your village is here to greet you. Era turned her face away from him and he could feel her tense as she saw her village practically run towards them. Era struggled to get down for a moment until Naruto moved to lower her to the ground as well. She still didn't trust her own legs. A soft grip remained on Nut's shoulder to keep her steady. She wasn't afraid that her village knew of her relationship. She was fairly certain they already did, thanks to Tamari, Mitsuri and the elders. She watched in amazement as her village All crowded around them excited to see her there. Kazekage, that former murderous demon. If she had never met Naruto, she would still be that demon. Her heart swelled as she looked at them all with smiles on their face. Boruto Asaki Maki began sternly. She had never seen the man smile, but he wasn't Ronin, and that was perhaps the closest he would ever offer. Thank you, but I didn't really do anything, Naruto said modestly, completely confused by the sudden gratitude. Gaara just looked at Naruto. He really didn't know what he'd done, no idea how many people he affected. It was all thanks to that mystery house gift. He had that mysterious power that made everybody he meets want to believe in him. That was how Naruto would bring about the world of peace. Chio had mentioned Andar would be there when she could. Gark frown deepened, glaring at Naruto. This was a soul-crushing amount of disappointment. She had been so looking forward to actually spending time with him, to actually be able to see what changed in him, to kiss him again and again and again, to have another date with him, to have a dozen stupid conversations that were completely meaningless yet end up burned into her more easily than her village's high story. She wanted to sleep with him, to lay down in the soft new bed she bought weeks ago in anticipation for his return. She knew she was being irrational. It made sense. Akatsuki was beginning their operations. The leaf was a likely target they would need, and more than she needed him. Gaara stood up sharply, yet slowly, still not quite ready for quick movements. She grabbed two objects from her desk. Archon, Naruto asked as her glare settled on him. I know you're tired and I would really like to stay here, but he stopped as Gaara reached up to his pack strap and began tugging on it. But this is the best chance for you to find the AA, right? Gaara knew the answer was yes. She knew how important retrieving Sas was to him. She didn't like knowing that he likely couldn't choose between herself and Sasuke. She doubted she could choose between Naruto and her own siblings, and most of all, she knew she could wait. This Gaara saw it holding up a small badge-like emblem. It was in the shape of a solid gourd, much like the one Gaara carried. This is a symbol of what you have done for the village. With it you will be able to enter Suna at any time for any reason. She spoke hopefully. The older shinobi in the room had their eyes widen. At that, unlimited access to another ninja village was unheard of. Even when the Whirlpool village was still up there, ninja were still slightly monitored. When they came to Koha, Naruto found himself spun around as Gaara placed a badge in his bag. I'm taking another shirt. Your old one is old. Her tone was one of no nonsense. Naruto could hear the implied in it's too small as well. He vaguely wondered if she still wore his old shirt to bed. That was an image that was forever burned into his mind. He looked forward to seeing Gaara in his shirt once again. Sure thing, Gaara-chan, Naruto said helplessly and a little bit turned on. Oh, that reminds me, front left pocket, there's something for you. Gaara had obtained one of Nutke's shirts, an unfolded crinkled one. The more it smelted like him, the better. She blinked at Naruto. Of course he would be one of those gift-giving freaks for Koha. Hell, he was probably why they were so generous. Era opened the pocket. It was a book. It looked slightly worn out, like somebody had tried to read through it as quickly as possible, but it was new and Gaara knew exactly what it was. She couldn't be seen with that book in her office, not in front of Baka. It was bad enough Tori and Mitsuri knew, but she wanted it bad. Taking Nut's shirt, she wrapped the book up in it in a small neat bundle. Now the book was going to smell like him too. Gaara wasn't sure if that was a good thing or a bad thing. Bashi simply looked at her like she had kicked a puppy. And besides, Naro began happily, you shouldn't need me to sleep anymore now that you don't have Shikaku, right? A pin could be heard dropping. Naruto watched as Gark's face shifted from one of embarrassed delight at a gift to one of anger. Tamari's eyes widened. We should get going to Kai Osama's grave, Tamari said quickly. Gaara nodded and followed behind her sister. The other ninja began to follow as well. Idiot, Sakura said, punching Naruto in the arm before she joined. Huh, was it something I said? Naruto asked, confused. He looked at Kanguro, who just shook his head. Naruto was the one that upset Gaara, therefore it was Nut's problem. It felt good they saw them out of their village. Gaara wasn't good with long goodbyes, but at the same time she didn't know when Naruto would return again. I guess I should shake your hand or something, but I'm not really good at those things, so I'll just leave it there. Naruto began stammering, looking away from Gaara's eyes and blushing in Embarrassment era blinked. She had been glaring at Naruto for a while now. She stepped forward with a sigh, her eyes softening as she did so. No handshake, Gar said simply as she wrapped her arms around Naruto. Those with keen eyes noticed her place something in his pocket. Naruto didn't notice to shock that Gar w. As hugging him he really shouldn't have been. Just come back to me, Gar whispered in his ear. I miss you. Those 3 words made N realize his mistake earlier. He made it sound like Gar was just using him for sleep. He was such a dunce, you bet, Naruto said happily as he pulled Gar back slightly, just enough for the briefest of kisses, any shorter and it wouldn't exist any longer and he wouldn't be able to leave her again. Naruto, Sakura asked, noticing something in Nutke pocket. What's this in your pocket? Curiosity had gotten the better of Sakura. She had seen Gar place the object in there and had waited for Naruto to pull it out and examine it. How? What? Naruto asked, digging into his jacket pocket. He found a small bracelet. It was a string of small round glass shapes, each one a finely made symbol of the Leafer Sand Village. It danced when the light hit it, sparkling into a dozen small rainbows. There was a small note with it as well. I had considered simply giving you a pair of my underwear. It worked in one of the books I read, but I wanted to give you something I made with my own hands, something you could wear all the time. Gar Boruto smiled as he put the bracelet on. Place the note in a safe place. T's a gift from Gar, and Naruto proclaimed happily, a little bit bummed on the underwear part, but this would do till he returned to her, to his love era. Hated snow. It was everything sand wasn't. It was crunchy, not soft. It was wet, not dry. It was cold, not that sand wasn't during the night, but snow was just inherently cold. Snow also got everywhere and stuck everywhere. The snow in her sandals was only adding to her irritation at the moment, not to mention her ability in the presence of moist even took more effort from her, which displeased her. Basically, she really hated snow. She had just gotten out of the Kage summit where they pretty much had agreed to go to war to stop Madara from obtaining Naruto. She was going to see him now, but it wasn't going to be the happy reunion she wanted. She knew that, but still she was going to see him, even though she was going to tell Naruto that S had tried to kill her and she had tried to kill him once again. Gar found herself to be incredibly tired. Her last sleep in Naruto's arms was when she had just been brought back from the dead. That was a grand total of 6 months, 21 days, 4 hours, 6 minutes and 56 seconds ago. The stress of Akatsuki of Naro not coming back. I was eating at her. Even her upgraded Naruto hugging device made out of the new clothing she took from him during their last encounter wasn't helping at all. Naruto was already standing outside in the cold when Gar arrived at his location. She noticed his scowl vanish as soon as his gaze quickly met hers. The simple fact that Gar could make Naruto smile brought her happiness. It reassured her that she wasn't just being selfish and using Naruto, though he would be used as a pillow as soon as there was a moment to breath, which may very well be in the next life. Right now they had something to discuss. Ran Yuto said happily. His eyes basically showed that he was begging for good news. It was unfortunate that Gar did not have any good news to give Naruto. Naruto went to Gar as soon as she was close enough. He quickly enveloped her in an embrace that showed how long he had missed her. She sighed in relief, her stress being in that simple hug they shared. The embrace closed off from the cold snow around them and the eyes of their fellow ninja. The warmth was so nostalgic. She wanted to stay like this for a while, away from everything, but Naruto had to ruin it. What happened at the summit? Bar aside as she broke away from Naruto's warmth, taking a step back from him, she then told him what transpired: the decision of the Kage-SK's assassination attempt, Gaara's battle with Sas. She spared no detail, watching Nutke emotions flash with every sentence she saw AG at Sas's attack. She saw tenderness and relief that she was okay. She saw regret that he wasn't there to stop Sas, and that's what happened at the 5CAG summit, Tamari said, sighing, obviously irritated by the turn of events. The whole ordeal was needlessly stressful for everybody involved. There was still more bad blood between the KAG and villages than there should be. Sas doesn't see you anymore. He seeks only darkness, Gar said, a frown etched into her face. Her eyes were closed now. She had resolved to tell Naruto the truth and what she thought needed to be said, but she didn't have the resolve to see Nutke face when she did it. He once said to me, "You woe Old become Hokage. Gar opened her eyes to see the shock and hurt on Narc face. She took a step forward till she was within an arm's length of Naruto. I've become Kazika Gay. She placed her arm onto Naruto's, feeling the cold warmth he offered at the moment. She couldn't help but rub his arm longingly. Now that you have resolved to take the mantle of a Kage, so you must do what needs doing. As Sasuke's friend bare eyes met, a conflict of wills between them. Naruto knew that his decision was right. Naruto again knew that Gar was right. Gar knew that she was wrong, but again she knew that he was wrong. Nutsy S flickered away from hers, looking down at the ground. The moment Naruto pushed her hand away hurt her a bit, but she wasn't surprised by his motion. He was a human after all. We've relayed everything we came to say. Tamari interjected for the two, breaking the icy silence that was settling between Naruto and her little sister. Let's go. Gar, allowing her gaze to link finger on Naruto for just a second longer. Gar began to turn away from Naruto. She needed to tell him something to make certain that this confrontation wasn't just a bitter one. She stopped after a few steps. She didn't turn to him, just clenched her fist and let the words flow out. I believe that I'm in love with you, Gar said abruptly. Nutke eyes widened slowly. He looked at her figure, completely shocked. She still didn't turn back, staring straight ahead. She could blame the tears brimming within her eyes on the snow. Before love was just some joke. Ttooed on my forehead. It was something that only the weak had, something that would ultimately betray me. Gar rolled her shoulders, standing up straighter and flexing her icy cold hands. Boruto always had warm hands, she realized, but after meeting you I realized something, that love is important. We need Gar let out a small chuckle as the first tear slipped off of her cheek. And I know that you love Sas as a brother. Gone, she heard Naruto mutter out. She turned to look at him. The slightest of smiles graced her face as she allowed a few tears flow freely. Now you must decide for yourself on what you can do. Oh, for your brother, I'll be waiting for you at the end. Boruto smiled. He nodded in understanding, his once depressed face now filled with determination. Sorry, Gar, and Naruto said, but he meant so much more in those words. Let's go, Gar said as she and her siblings took off quickly, darting through the air. Being Naruto, who had a lot to think about both regarding her confession and her decision. What are you doing on the battlefield? Gar finally shouted after a while of wondering what he was doing currently. It was the adrenaline. Probably she and Noi had just taken down the third, or was it second, such a gay Naruto's help. Naruto, the same idiot that she was fairly certain she loved at this point, was on the battlefield, a battle that was taking place to make sure that he, more specifically the QB that he contained, didn't get obtained by Madara. Why did you come? Gar shouted again, feeling actual anger boil up inside of her. Did he not understand that for him being here was ruining the whole point of this battle? They were fighting too so that they would be safe. She was fighting so that he would be safe. Naruto just grimaced, looking sideways. He made out in slight anxiety. Gar noted that his body radiated a golden chakra that seemed to give off heat. He appeared much happier since their last visit, his face twisting in jovial and embarrassed smiles. I love you, Naruto offered with a helpful smile. This was not how he planned on telling her, but he hoped it would get him away from this mess currently. I twitched. She couldn't take it anymore. She knew he was trying to get out of trouble. She knew he was just trying to buy time to think of an actual excuse, and she couldn't care less about that. He meant those words. She could feel it. Naruto found himself being thrust up by the sand beneath his feet. And was met by Gar, who floated over to him on her sand platform. Nutke eyes widened. She wasn't certain what was different about this kiss. It could be the fact that Naruto was radiating chakra. It could be the fact that her heart was still pounding from battle. It could be the fact that Naruto just said that he loved her. It could be the fact that she believed him. It could be none or all of those things, but that kiss was utterly amazing. Now explain, Garrett demanded, dropping to the ground. And it better be good, Garrett demanded while wiping her mouth and folding her arms in a no-moving stance. As interesting it is watching you two love birds. There is still battle going on, and Noi commented as he began to float off the ground, which is why I will brief you on the way. The voice of Shikara echoed throughout their heads. For a second Gar thought that Shukaku had somehow ended up inside her head again. As only off by a vowel. Shukaku Nara explained the reason why Naruto was there, leaving a rather amused and Noi and a still slightly conflicted Gar. Gar said abruptly, concern lacing her growly voice, I understand going from battle to battle, but are you certain you'd be able to use the QBiz chakra F? Or so long. Naruto frowned briefly before smiling at her. She should really learn to trust. Don't worry Garen, I won't die until I do two things, Naruto said, grinning brightly at her. They maintained a look for a long moment as Gar tried to piece together what the two things were. The K Hogan, what else? Gar asked, rather confused and ashamed that she didn't know what Narc other desires were. Nudo looked endearingly at her, prompting a nervous blush on her face. There are you, Naruto said simply. He watched with delight as Gar's face went red at a thought, looking like she just ate something incredibly sour. Gar couldn't reply, just muttering out a silent "oh," which produced chuckles from the blonde before her, she enjoying the thought Naruto wouldn't die until after he became Hokage and he married her. A sudden bout of anger surged out of her then at the thought of those requirements for Naruto's death. If you die right after we get married, I'm going to bring you back to life and kill you myself. Dar's death threat caught Naruto by surprise and he nearly tripped over his own 2 feet. Right, got it Garen, why are you taking my head? Rasa the fourth Kazekage, father of Gar, and the reason why Shukaku was sealed inside, Gar asked in a puzzled and slightly concerned manner. Ross understood perfectly well that his daughter had every right to kill him, but wasn't the taking of the head against that. Was she taking a trophy or something? Gar was literally decapitating him with a kunai, and while it didn't hurt her anything, he was creeped out and the rest of his body was sealed thanks to her sand, so he couldn't retaliate. I read in a book that it is customary to ask somebody's father for their blessing before you propose to them, Gar replied blandly as she finished decapitating her father. She held the former Kazekage by the scruff of his sandy locks. Why would you want my blessing? Rasa asked. The small amount of respect he had gained for his scary little daughter was beginning to wane. I don't, but he might, Gar said flatly as she dangled her father's head in her hand. They weren't making any eye contact. It wasn't something that they had honestly ever done. The reason I'm still alive and not enslaved by the demon you put in me. Gar's tone was cold and uncaring. He sounds like a powerful ninja. What's his name? Rasa asked curiously. Surely he would have known about such an astounding ninja from his own village. Nudo Yamaki Jiki of the Q and future Hok of Koha, Gar said with a small smile. Rasa's face twisted into a frown. For in Shinobi and from Koha of all places I refuse. There were better times to go over marriage than in the middle of a deadly battlefield against one of the greatest threats known to the world. But then again, Gaara's pessimistic side was telling her that this would her last and only chance to get things such as this settled. Besides, it felt like this was the right moment, with every dead person coming to life and all. She arrived just as a tall blonde man appeared onto the scene in a yellow flash. He looked a lot like Nudo with the exception of the signs of resurrection behind him. Was Naruto being healed by Sakura? Thank you for taking care of my son, Minato said happily, smiling while looked at Sakura. You wouldn't happen to be his girlfriend, would you? Minato asked curiously as he desperately tried to get more information about his son's life before he died. Again, Gar scowled. The title belongs to me, Gar said, walking up from behind Minato, still clutching Rasa's head by the hair. Who are you? Gar asked confused. The man had called Nutke Sundi as Minato Nami Kazi, 4th Hokage of Koha. Rosa said from his resting position while aiming. More importantly, Hunes, my dad isn't that cool, Gar and Naruto asked happily, allowing Sakura to continue healing him. Gar wasn't too fond of their close proximity. Rather ironic that he sealed a demon in his child as well, Rasa commented with a chuckle. Why are you being carried around like that, Rasa? Minato asked, chuckling. The battle could wait a couple of more seconds. Besides, he wouldn't be able to focus on the fight after seeing something like that. Naruto needs to ask for his blessing to marry me, Gar said proudly as Rasa then found himself being flung through the air towards Nudo, who looked aghast. She couldn't help but smile as Naruto fumbled Rasa's head in horror, muttering apologies before catching Rasa upside down. Era said with an emotionless "Bo Lord 4th, I wish to have you blessing in marrying your son like